Greetings, Marsh here, and welcome to episode 18 of my Pyanodons playthrough. In this episode, we are going to work on making caravans and latex. Enjoy! So this is running pretty well. It takes quite a while for the rocks to build up, and we can't really continue the process until they have. And one thing we haven't actually calculated for is the science itself. So let's do that real quick. And we need to decide how much to make. And if we go back to our rock setup here, we are expecting to get 20 of the formic acid per second. So I sized a build here that uses the 20 formic acid. Just so happens that if you build this 4 to 16 setup, then that will cleanly allow you to make 0.2 science packs per second. And there's basically two halves of it, the substrate half and the glass half. The substrate is made with a bunch of stuff, and then the glassware, which is where we need the formic acid, has all of this going into it. And there's something else to consider here. Cool, we got a bunch of rocks, so just keep filling up machines. It is exponential growth, it just feels very slow. But if you look at our previous science setup, it is actually running at 0.2 a second as well, and it just runs at that speed because of the inserter limitations of the time. And that's the wrong machine, not that it matters. And every time you make a new science pack, it's almost certainly in preparation of a new tier of science, and they tend to have the same ratio of materials. So you see that the PyScience 1 tier requires 1 of PyScience 1 and 2 of automation packs. And this basically applies to every single item. They require more of them, but the ratio is the same. Just like if we go into the logistics science pack here, the ratio changes again, where it's 1 to 2 to 3. So basically, every time you make a new science, you want to analyze the science packs that your factory has, and if you want to change things. And we definitely do want to change things. We have better inserters now, so it doesn't have to be quite this crazy. But also, this isn't going to be enough science, that we need to crank it up, and it's going to be 0.4 a second instead. And let's analyze something real quick. Even with our better inserters, we're going to be limited to 3 per side, so that's 3.6 items a second, but we're actually going to need to have 2 assembling machines anyway. So basically it means we just need to copy our existing setup a second time essentially. We are already making them where they are, however, we would expect the new science to be made somewhere around the rocks here. As far as input requirements, it does require some factory stuff. We are already nearby where Moss is, so it kind of makes sense that it would be made around here. And since science packs are a very dense resource, you really don't want to belt them across the factory. It would be much better to try to make them where they're being consumed if possible. And how is our 3D printing of rocks going? Pretty well. We're just about running out of codexes, and that's a good enough place to shut it down. And yeah, we already have a setup here, but we might want to try to rebuild it anyway and just make it a little cleaner. It should be essentially something like this. So before we put any more effort into it, let's actually put it to where its final place is going to be. And this does mean that we can pull all of this out. There's a lot of craziness in here that's not required anymore. Of course, we're just going to have to move the items somewhere else instead. Kind of want to unhook things a little. We don't know if we're going to use this setup for something else. Probably not, but we'll leave it here for now. This setup won't work anymore without the planter boxes, but I'm actually okay with that. We could just place them here instead of removing them. Of course, all of these labs are going to move, but let's just leave everything here for now. Here we go. Starting to get exponential growth. Because now both sides are running. As far as where to make this, well, we've got this cliff in the way, so presumably not much would go here. So let's do our setup, where it's 1, and then if I've done this correctly, basically a second one. And let's just space it out a little. It's so weird having splitters now. Things are coming from the right, and that's probably not the correct side. And I do want to fix it. And for the output of the machine, it probably doesn't matter, but let's just combine both the spoilage and the science pack. Something like this. Almost. Just a few more creatures and it'll be fully populated. And there we go. There's the last of the rocks, so we can handle them in a second. We just need to make sure this new science setup works. So there we go. Making the soil, but let's pipe in the logs first. This will produce the wood that we need for these planter boxes, but also put the wood in as fuel for every other assembler, and that'll make it so we don't have to deal with ash. Okay, let's start pumping everything in. The bricks and the plates go to the first assembler, and seemingly good. The ash will go into the second assembler. The third is the spare parts, and the fourth is the flora, which goes into the third machine. And looking good. Right now, nothing has gone bad, but when it does, it will be on this belt and we can move them appropriately. But for now, we can say that this setup is ready for research. And now we have to handle the PyScience 1. The end of the process of the rocks is to go into a slaughterhouse. Yum. And we can do it on either side, but we should probably do it on this side since it seems like science is going to be over here. We do need to put them in the cages before they can be slaughtered. It'll be in and then out. The output needs to be just the cages. And we do need to make a few. They get processed one at a time, so we don't need a ton of cages. And sure, let's do 10 of them. They are actually quite slow to construct. So in go the rocks, and I'm going to go get the caravan depot right there. We put the cages in and it works very fast, and then it's chopping up the rocks to give us all of that yummy stuff. And there it goes. Now which thing we keep in here and which ones we don't kind of depends on which ones we're going to use as food. And since we're here, we might as well start making caravans. And these do require rock cocoons, as well as some other stuff that we were already making to make the rocks. But we might as well make them down here because this is where the cocoons are. And you can see that these numbers are actually kind of high. So let's do what we can to prepare it here. We want to get the caravans as quickly as possible because they will make the logistics of the factory significantly simpler than they are now. It's going to be adjacent to this setup in design, so we can just remove it. Okay, we'll push water in, start putting seaweed in, and this is going to be our first big seaweed facility. And then the seaweed needs to be turned into agar. Luckily, we have wood very close here, so we can just use this as a fuel. In go the petri dishes. We've got some in our inventory so we can get rid of them, but those can just run continuously as required. So let's hook all this up. Those are running strong. And we can pull the biocrud out as we get any. Eventually we'll probably want a more substantial setup making these, but for now we just want to get these caravans up and running because they are very useful. So in it comes running in a much more substantial way than previously set up. And we might as well put them on the same belt here that we also need to have 4 incubators. A lot of this crazy belt stuff can be put to an end if we have caravans to move the items around. I don't want to quite get into them until we actually have them so I can show you how they work. But for now, we really want to get all the resources here. Unfortunately, there's just so much going on in here now that it's getting very difficult to find anywhere to take anything. Okay, we'll make the glass here and put in the wood fuel. So those are rapidly going. Here's the other resources to make the container. Looking good. I think these need to have 2 inserters on them. And any of the spoilage will appear on this same belt, which means it will get to where it needs to go eventually. Flora doesn't really spoil all that quickly, so long as you're constantly using it for things. Now that we're getting close to the end here, specifically where we have a bunch of cocoons, we can now put the creature chamber in here. And then we want to have a filter here looking for any of the spoilage items. So that's most of the things now. And we're actually probably going to want to have a second creature chamber in here because we're going to want to have the liquid caravans as well. But now we need the big data array, making the earth samples. This also needs biosamples. And we do need some science packs. They're kinda close, but kinda not. And we're going to need iron plates as well. So we'll just pull it off. We're reaching critical mass of belt craziness, but that's fine because once we have these caravans, logistics are going to completely change. Okay, science packs and the irons here. So it makes a chest, The radar is making the samples, which means the only thing we need now is saline water. Saline water is probably really far away, I'm guessing, because we sent it north up here, which means, ugh. I don't know if I want to send it straight through the middle of the factory, so I almost want to put it just straight into the middle of nowhere. And there we go. In goes the saline water, and we're making caravans. Personally, I don't find myself using the liquid caravans as much, so I'm less concerned with these. And actually, let's rotate these to the side, so I don't feel the need to make a ton of them. But nonetheless, we do want to make both kinds. And it's actually quite fast, only 50 seconds to craft one. You just want to make sure you have the resources available. But there we go. We've got our first caravan. Slow-moving land creature with a lack of free will. And there it is. He's got a symbol on there saying he has no food. So we're going to need to deal with that. But let's pick them up. They only stack in units of 1, so you need to be careful about them. And also, they have names. And that is perhaps so you are a little compassionate towards them. How quaint. And the fluid caravan is made with pumps and pie tanks. And usually what I do with these is just put a manual number in there. So if we want to make 10 of these, we're going to need to have 20 pumps. And the more expensive thing is the 10 40K tanks. I think that using pipes is better than caravans in general because they really don't have throughput limitations, whereas belts do. So belts are inherently more helped out by logistics than liquids are. And we are basically using up all of our stone. And that is to be expected. I would like to make more. In doing so, it's going to create more shale, and we need to get rid of the stuff that we have. And I guess we could start running it again. I was just concerned about the gasoline filling up, but it might actually fill up aromatics now, but sure. Let's hook up the other one, and we will use picker dollies here to move things, and if we do that, it should now be going in here, and it is. Shale is a very good source of fuel and stone, so it's worthwhile to keep it running. Okay, so then for this, we put in our 20 pumps and 10 tanks, and then that will make our 10 fluid caravans, and we're making more here. Okay, so let's talk about caravans. There are some pie entries related to this, and you can pause the video and read it if you'd like. And this entry here will show us all of the existing caravans and what they're doing. So all caravans require food, and they just kind of wander and do nothing if they don't have any, and luckily this will tell you where they are. So, you know, if it was off screen, you would have an arrow showing you where the hungry critter is. But if we go to cargo here, you can see the different foods that it's willing to eat and how many actions it will do with that food. Here are the different actions that they can do. And most importantly, waiting does not use food and storing food does not use food. And of the items that frogs turn into, we get meat, guts, and brains. The meat decays in 4 hours, the guts in 8, and the brains in 16. All of them will decay into jerky, and jerky is a food that caravans use. They would prefer brains. And to minimize the amount of non-food that's in here, let's put an inserter and say only the chitin, and then the rest of this will just be food. So caravans can only interact with caravan outposts, and they work much like trains do, in the sense that you can have a schedule and interrupts, and probably the best use of an interrupt is to tell it to pick up food when it runs out. But my experience is that it can be a little glitchy, especially if there's no food here, because they're not supposed to use food to pick up food. Seemingly they kind of do when it comes to interrupts. But we're going to need this to run for a little while, so we can have a selection of food to use. So normally I wouldn't use a tank here, but for now, let's put one in. And how about we use the 15K one here, just so we can see how caravans work. Right now, our ability to use them is fairly limited because we don't have very much caravan fuel. So in other words, brains and meat. So we're going to need to produce a little bit to get started. Initially, we're not going to be using very many caravans, but that will rapidly change. So we need to decide, what should we use the caravan on? And there's probably more situations where they're useful, but I can think of 4 of them right now. One condition is, does it have to travel a long distance? Because caravans are naturally good at that, and they use biter pathing as well. They can get stuck on buildings that you can't walk through. So that is a large part about why every building I build has a gap. That is to allow caravans to go through. Certain setups don't really have it. Like right here, I didn't have a gap between the pipes. It is possible that the caravan can get stuck. It would be much better to do it like this setup is, where there's gaps and it can walk through. But definitely you'll want to build your factory with gaps everywhere just to allow the caravans to travel in a straight line. It makes them more efficient that way. It doesn't change how much fuel they use because the fuel is based on how many stops they make, but nonetheless it's better for the caravans. So yes, one thing they're good at is long distance. So something such as picking up these moondrops would be good because the moondrops are so far away from everything else in the factory. Another situation that they're good for is low throughput. And right now we don't need very many moondrops, so that applies, but a different situation could be something like tin, where we're only making, I believe, 1.5 tin, pretty much. And this is something that would be good for caravans. Another situation is the many stops type of run, where it picks up at one place, and the thing I can think of is the solid separators, where it can make one of these 6 things and then deliver all of them and make 6 stops while doing so. And another situation they're good for is high stack size items. Copper ore would be terrible at 50, but because ash stacks in 1,000, that means that each caravan can hold 30,000 ash in its inventory. So if you want to move ash around, caravans are actually really good for that. So let's find a use for caravans here. And yes, the thing that comes to mind is dealing with all these ore byproducts. So we'll just put the outpost here, and how many ore are we going to have? Well, quite a bit. Let's put 4 inserters in there for now. And we don't need to have any kind of filter on here because the caravan will just pick up whatever it picks up and it'll be fine. And because they have such flexibility in where they can go, we can just take the ore all the way to the absolute best place for it, which in this case would be the back of our copper mine. And it will help to put filters on here just to make sure it doesn't pick up anything it's not supposed to. Losing mines. It will be nice to have electric miners here, but basically just dot these caravan outposts anywhere where items need to be dropped off. Fortunately, they can't be moved with picker dollies. That should be our 5 pickup points, so we can come back here to our caravan. We don't need to be next to it to set a schedule. So the first thing it's going to do is come here and load up on food. And we'll say, don't wait until fulfilled. And then the next stop will be to fill cargo. And we're not going to worry about counting each ore. It'll just sit there until its inventory is full. Because the outpost itself serves as a buffer, that works fine. So we want to try to create an efficient route for it. The first one should probably be lead here. So we'll come in and unload items until lead ore is 0. The same for iron, the same for zinc, the same for aluminum. And finally, it has to go all the way down here to copper. Now, there are other ways of doing this. You could just say empty cargo and simply don't have wait until fulfilled checked. And if you have put filters on all of the stops, it will work correctly, but you have to set it up exactly right. And I actually prefer this because then it becomes very clear what it's doing at every outpost. And by the way, if you want to see what the outpost is, you can actually left click on the outpost and it'll show you on the screen. And if you decide to change it, you can right click it and then select the new one. So after it has dropped off all of the ores, it will go back to the beginning. So let's go down there and see how it does. We don't have to physically follow it, but I kind of want to, just to visually show how it works. And it's got some amount of food in here, but that's okay. We'll just tell it to store food. It does. It picked up all of the brains that it had, and that was 79 brains. And from here, it's going to move. Unfortunately, we can't ride the back of it like you can with the transport drones, so we're just going to have to follow it. But it's actually reasonably fast compared to our own walking speed. So it's going to come in here and pick up every ore it can. And here's what its inventory looks like. As the ores come in, it will fill up and certain stacks won't be full and it'll just be waiting here. And any ore that it can't pick up will then start filling up the outpost. And eventually it's going to get a full stack of something because it's basically producing all of them equally. And then next time it comes in, it'll just get a full amount. But for now, let's just tell it to go to the next stop to see how it works. So you can kind of see here that having these gaps makes it much easier for the caravan to go through. That if those gaps weren't there, it would have been kind of confused. And they do eventually find their way, but it does slow them down. So instead of slowing them down, why not make it easier for them? And I do like how the exact order of the stops kind of influences how efficient they are at completing their tasks. So having a well-organized factory is kind of important. So it makes it here, and it didn't drop anything. Why not? I did unload items until target has, when we should have done unload items until caravan has. And it looks like I kind of did both, but there we go. Let's try again. Get rid of the wait condition. There we go. It dropped off what it could. Wow, he's actually kind of fast. That on the snow. He's actually faster than we are, but there we go, dropping off the iron. The reason why I don't run a bunch of caravans is because they don't scale very well. That when you have a huge factory, figuring out where all the caravans are and what they're doing can be kind of difficult. And you can see here how it kind of gets confused a little bit, but it still found its way. So if you don't want to follow every caravan everywhere, if you come in here to the Caravan Manager, you will have your list of caravans. And you can also click View on Map if you'd rather just follow them. So we can see that he goes there, drops off the aluminum. No, he's leaving me behind on the ice. So he comes in, drops off the copper, and now his inventory is empty except for his food. And now his next stop is to pick up more. And this does waste their time a little bit. It doesn't waste their food though, because picking up food doesn't count as a stop. And I prefer to do it this way, not only because the way the interrupts work is a little janky when it comes to caravans, but also when you change the food types you want to give them, if their schedule tells them to go to an outpost like this, and there he goes, you can actually click on each outpost and find out which caravans are there. When you get a new food type, you can just go to your old food type, and then you can open them up and change where they pick up food from by just changing the outpost. And usually what I do is wait until there's at least a caravan's worth of food in the outpost to start a new one. So right now, there's not enough brains, and we're filled up on formic acid. So in the beginning, your ability to expand the caravans is going to be limited, but at least from now on, you will have many different logistics options. So here he is. Now he's going to wait and just fill up on the ore. And because we've done that, it means we can follow this belt. Oh wow, that goes everywhere. Let's not do that. But we can follow the belt to the places that it was dropping off ores and then remove that logic. So none of this is required anymore. Things are a lot simpler now. But like for example, we don't need the aluminum anymore. And you want to be careful about pulling all this stuff out because you might break something. So usually I like to leave things in place and just see if anything makes it to the end, and then we'll know. Whenever you're looking for ways to make the factory cleaner, look for empty belts. And that was probably handling a byproduct that you didn't make very much. And that is something that you can then send to the caravans and have them deal with it. Well, that was a bit of work to get set up for caravans, but once we start making science, we're going to have all of those brains that we can then use for more caravans to make our factory even simpler. Even simpler. It was the one tiny change. Well, we can go back to our science build here, and all the numbers seem pretty good. There are some options we can change to make the window a little better. For example, we can turn off the pollution display because it's irrelevant, and that will give us a little bit more room to display useful information and get rid of tips. It would be nice to get rid of beacons. Spoiler alert, I don't like beacons. That is far in the future, but we have a shopping list now, and that does mean that we're going to use the microorganism mine and the research center. So we will have used every building again. There's basically two halves of it, the glassware and the substrate. And the glassware is the part that is related to the rocks. We basically need to make the stoppers. Although we could also just make the latex itself. So all of that can at least be made near the rocks. So we don't have to move this formic acid very far, where we need 2 of the latex, but then 1 of the slab, and then 1 of the sodium alginate. And actually I kind of want to make this as compact as possible because it is a perfect ratio. So in goes the water, making the seaweed, In goes the water making the limestone. Now we just need some stone, and that is kind of a problem because we're really low on stone right now. For now, because we want to see this actually work, let's pull in some of the stone that is being made from copper since it's right here, because it kind of sucks to run a setup when it doesn't have any resources and you can't see how it works. There's a lot of stone right here though. We can use that just to fill up the belt as best we can, because we are actually really low on stone right now. Kind of makes sense. We put a huge belt going all the way to make our new science, so there's a huge buffer that it needs to fill up. But anyway, we've got our seaweed and limestone, and then the stone goes into this building to make the sodium alginate, a multi-purpose stabilizer. So it gets shot in to the destructive distillation column. We also need the formic acid now, and temporarily have these pipes going in this direction just to use up all of the acid we've already made. And now we need the creamy latex. And how about we put them right here, because we already have the limestone. And we need 8 sap trees. It's not going to be anywhere close to as crazy as this, thank goodness. And although we have splitters, we are not saved from using the underground trick here. And now we wait for the sap. And in it comes. That's enough to get started. There it is, making our creamy latex. And then we'll hook it up, making the latex slab. And then those slabs get inserted into these high pressure furnaces, and now all we need is steam to turn it into latex. Luckily we already piped steam in, so it's just a question of pushing it further now. So in it goes. Is this going to be an achievement? Yep, making the latex, and that is one component we're going to need. That the next step is to turn it into stoppers, and coal is very far away from here, so we might as well do this next to where we're actually making the science. Latex is a fairly low value item, so I'm fine with putting it on a belt like this. Now we just needed to go through our formic acid real quick, and we can put a pump in here to help it along. And that's the end of this episode. On the next one, we are finally going to start making PyScience 1. Thanks for watching. I'll see you later.